The House Judiciary Committee revealed yesterday that during Hope Hicks's testimony, Trump administration lawyers intervened over 150 times to stop her from answering questions, citing immunity, seeking to challenge that claim in a lawsuit. Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler told Politico the administration's objections, quote, very much played into our hands, and that, quote, the Hicks interview was very useful to give us the record that we can show the judge how extreme it really is. And Elliot, let me just stay on you with this one. Nadler is saying that he got something significant from this Hicks testimony yesterday. Is he overselling it, or is that actually the case here?
He got something significant as a matter of litigation strategy. I don't think he got something significant in terms of selling all of this to the public, because nobody sees it and nobody saw it. As a matter of litigation strategy, the argument that the House will be making in the courts is that the president and the administration are stymieing and blocking and, frankly, stonewalling any attempts to investigate. So, for instance, of the 155 things that Hope Hicks didn't answer, one question was, where is your desk in the White House? And she was only left to answer questions about what the weather was on her first day. She really didn't provide much and sort of blocked answers to even basic questions. If the argument from the House Judiciary Committee is across the administration's relationship with Congress and with this committee, they simply are not respecting us as an investigator, as a co-equal branch of government, this does strengthen that. But again, Steve, this is an exercise in selling the public, as much as it's winning in court. You have to get the public behind what you're doing, either for oversight or an impeachment proceeding. And it just does, this is all happening in secret, and I think to that extent, Nadler doesn't win.
Yeah, and Betsy, I think you were alluding to this before, though. I mean, Democrats have been talking for the last month. We said there at the top of the segment here, this idea of bringing the Mueller report to life, using these hearings to break through to a public that so far, seems a pretty strong partisan divide on these things. Is there mounting frustration there among Democrats that they maybe feel they're not succeeding in that goal right now?
Oh, there's acute frustration, which has been the case for months now. One of the challenges that Democrats face is that part of the reason they were able to flip the House in 2018 is because they argued they would be able to do robust oversight of the Trump administration. But thus far, the House Democratic Caucus, speaking quite broadly, is long on effort, but pretty short on deliverables, with the exception of Chairman Elijah Cummings' investigation into efforts to share civil nuclear technology with the government of Saudi Arabia. There's not a lot of brand new information out of the Trump administration that we, the American public, have because of the way that congressional Democrats have done oversight. And some of that, without question, is because of the obstruction efforts the Trump administration has engaged in. Trump himself, of course, said, we're going to stiff arm every single congressional subpoena and document request. And that's something that drives Democrats nuts. They feel they have a constitutional obligation to get information out of this administration. Part of the reason that the Hope Hicks testimony is legally important is that it gives Nadler standing in court. He can now challenge this idea that presidents of different parties have argued, called immunity, the notion that the president's close advisors don't have to tell anything about their work for the president to Congress. Nadler can now say the House of Representatives has been wronged by the executive branch making this argument, and he now is able to try to force or demand a judge to make a call on the field. Can the executive branch argue that senior White House officials are immune from congressional scrutiny? That's important not just for understanding the Trump administration, but for understanding the way the American government works. And it's going to be absolutely fascinating.
All right. Betsy Woodruff, Elliot Williams, thank you both for taking a few minutes.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.